A pioneer of Catholic adult faith education in Australia, the Aquinas Academy was founded by the Marist Fathers in 1945 to be a centre located in Sydney for the study of philosophy and theology in the Thomistic tradition. Later, the Academy broadened its curriculum to offer basic education in theology, morality, psychology and spirituality. And some of its programs spread out over the east coast of Australia. But in December 2021, the Academy closed its on-site course offerings. On the 23rd of October 2022, teachers and alumni met in the crypt of St Patrick's Church Hill to celebrate the Academy's achievements and its people. Leanne Zinner chaired the celebration.
Welcome all to this celebration of the Aquinas Academy. In a moment I'll outline our schedule for the afternoon, but let us begin by sitting quietly and listening to a hymn that will remind us of ultimately why we are here and why the Aquinas Academy came into existence. God beyond all names.
Unfortunately for our podcast, copyright considerations prevent our reproducing that sublime composition, arrangement and performance of Bernadette Farrell's God Beyond All Names. However, you could inexpensively download the very same track from the website of the publisher OCP, that is, Oregon Catholic Press.
Thank you for joining us today. We acknowledge the first inhabitants of this land, symbolised by the bronze statues of Barangaroo and Bennelong at the door. Of those people who were very sorry they couldn't come, of which there were many, we've received apologies from Father Tony Corcoran, who's in Rome, and Mari's leadership team as they're attending a conference at the moment. We will begin with a brief outline of history of the Aquinas Academy presented by Father Peter McMurrick. Father Peter is a Marist priest currently on staff at St Patrick's Church Hill. He has worked mainly in parishes and in administration roles with the Marist Fathers, Australian Province. He's been the archivist for the Marist Fathers, Australian Province, for 37 years. A copy of Peter Master's thesis, The Harmonising Influence of Religion, St Patrick's Church Hill, 1840 to the present, has been published and it's available in the back of the room, along with Michael Whelan's book, The Call to Be, and The History of Aquinas Academy by Julia Thorpe, who's also here. So, Father Peter, over to you.
Thanks, Leanne. Some of us are probably getting on a bit in years, but I suspect it would be a reasonable assumption that there's nobody actually here this afternoon so old that they were here 77 years ago when... Oh, there is someone. Righto. Okay. So that's something I wasn't expecting. So the Academy first opened its doors 77 years ago on the 7th of March 1945. I suspect most of us, however, have our links with the Academy at a much later period, maybe from the 1990s onwards. I'm a bit of a strange choice to be standing up here this afternoon because, as far as I can recall, I've only ever attended one single lecture at the Academy. But I'm going to talk a little bit about the foundational vision of the Academy and where it's travelled over the years. Now, most of us would know that the founder of the Aquinas Academy was a Marist priest, Austin Woodbury, and he was a larger-than-life character. His parents had a little farm at Spencer on the Hawkesbury. He went through primary school and then spent several years helping his parents on the family farm. He educated himself through reading and correspondence courses. In his mid-teens, he decided he had a vocation to the priesthood, and after completing secondary schooling at Hunters Hill and at Mittagong with the Marist Fathers, and a couple of years at the Marist Seminary in New Zealand, he was sent to Rome, where he was ordained and where he gained doctorates in philosophy and theology. Austin Woodbury was 45 years old when he founded the Academy. He was noticeably tall, a bit eccentric, someone with superior intelligence, and equally at home in the arcane world of philosophical and theological speculation, or judging pedigree cattle at local shows, where he was a highly regarded and much sought after show judge, and he never lost that earthy edge. Late in 1944, Woodbury gave a talk to the Catholic Journalist Guild. Back in those days, there was a Catholic guild or association for just about every occupation under heaven. A Catholic Doctors Guild, Catholic Firemen's Guild, Catholic Policemen's Guild, and obviously a Catholic Journalists Guild. And during the talk, Woodbury outlined his vision for a new educational venture. In his own words, an institute in which young men and women of the professions and of the public service and of the various institutions of post-school education, teachers and others, might be made acquainted with the profound wisdom of the great Catholic masters of philosophy and theology, and thereby be fitted for the role of guides unto the minds of Australians. So this was a vision that was forward-looking, progressive, inclusive, and in the context of the church at the time, even somewhat countercultural. In a church which was highly clerical and hierarchical, and which often dumbed down its laity, this was a vision which took the laity seriously and which sought to share with them the power which is knowledge. It was a vision which included equally men and women, and it was outward-looking and missionary. The knowledge was being shared so that the recipients could be worthy guides for their fellow Australians. The Aquinas Academy opened in humble premises in Gloucester Street, just at the back of St Patrick's Church, on the 7th of March 1945. In those days it was the feast of St Thomas Aquinas, so the name of the institute and the date chosen on which to begin both pointed to the orientation or focus. It would teach philosophy and theology according to the insights of the great Dominican medieval philosopher and theologian Thomas Aquinas. The Academy went from strength to strength. In its first year, there were 105 students enrolled. In 1952, there were 300. In 1963, 600. In an amazing development in the 1960s, Woodbury inspired a number of professional men to put their careers on hold and go to Rome or Canada to pursue full-time university doctorates with a view to returning to the Academy as teachers. At least 7 of Woodbury's students followed this path. 4 returned to Sydney with postgraduate qualifications to resume their former careers and begin a long association with the Academy as lecturers. The remaining 3 took up academic posts in Canadian universities. And the early 1960s were really the Academy's golden age in the Woodbury period. In addition to the large numbers and the developments in the direction of laity teaching laity, there was a strong network of social interaction between the students at the Academy. And an 8-page monthly magazine, The Academician, carried social news and philosophical and theological articles written by students and lecturers. While numbering among its students Catholics from all walks of life, the Academy was particularly proud to be able to highlight the presence of a number of prominent doctors, lawyers, and university academics in its classes. So in the pre-Vatican II Church, Woodbury's Academy was a refreshing and forward-looking venture into adult education for Catholics. But even as early as the late 1950s, there were indications of a fundamental problem which the Academy would increasingly face in the years following the Council, namely the unacceptability of a total commitment to a single philosophical and theological system in a church which was moving more and more in the direction of plurality. Because in many ways Woodbury was the academy, it soared to great heights when he was in his prime. He was a magnetic personality with an idiosyncratic and highly effective teaching style and an ability to present complex philosophical and theological concepts in a way which made them readily accessible. As he entered his years of decline, the academy declined too. In 1974, the year he retired, enrolled students had dropped to 40. The academy was as good as dead. Another Marist theologian, John Thornhill, became the new principal in 1975. While retaining for some years at least the academy's traditional philosophy courses, he also moved in a new direction. The academy began presenting courses aimed at helping Catholics come to terms with and assimilate the renewed theology of Vatican II. And basically, he sought to tap into what he hoped was a large market of Catholics who had come through the changes of Vatican II, but who recognised the need for a new theological underpinning to replace their pre-conciliar theological worldview. In 1977, he was joined by Father Alan Connors, and the Christian Growth Program was born, combining theological updating with a personal development component. The academy became mobile, and the Christian Growth Program was presented to thousands of people in many Sydney parishes, and eventually was exported to other New South Wales dioceses, and then finally interstate. Alan Connors became principal in his own right in 1981. In his last year as principal, 1991, 2,000 people attended Aquinas Academy lecture courses, not including many others who attended one-off workshops and annual summer schools. In more recent years, Kevin Bates and then Michael Whelan brought their personal gifts and strengths to the work of the academy, each moulding and shaping it in a different way, as John Thornhill and Alan Connors had done before them. Michael has spent 21 years in charge of the academy, a term bettered only by the 29-year reign of the formidable Dr. Woodbury. And in a way, they're fitting bookends for the 77-year history of the academy, a beginning and an end, and many good things in between, for which many people might find themselves eventually being eternally grateful. Thank you.
Thank you, Father Peter. Now we're going to have 3 brief presentations representing all the academic staff who've contributed so much to the people through the Aquinas Academy over the years. We're going to start with Father Michael Whelan. Now, Father Michael was appointed the Director of Aquinas Academy in January 2000 and has held this position until the closure of the Academy in 2021. He is currently the Parish Priest of St Patrick's. Father Michael.
Thank you very much, Leanne. And Peter and I are going to have some disagreement on the actual numbers here. However, we'll see. Aquinas Academy is first and foremost people. More than a program or a building or a geographical site, it's human beings. With this in mind, I want to particularly acknowledge Sister Marie Biddle. She has been a companion with me in the work of adult education for nearly 40 years, the last 22 years being at Aquinas. I'm deeply grateful for her companionship and advice. Together, we had the great privilege of sharing part of life's journey with many wonderful people, lecturers and volunteers. It seems to me that the Aquinas Academy is something of a bellwether, particularly in the Catholic Church. It was a daring and imaginative thing that Father Austin Woodbury did in launching the Aquinas Academy, even before the Second World War had ended. He began a project that helped to pioneer adult education in the Catholic Church in Australia. Whilst it was pioneering, it was also of the times. And the times were changing. I think there are 5 distinct eras represented in the life of the Academy, reflecting those changing times within which it operated these past 78 years. The first era was from the mid-40s to the mid-60s. Father Austin Woodbury was the director and principal teacher. Logical arguments and abstract and confident answers dominated. It was dependent exclusively on a particular interpretation of the philosophy of St. Thomas Aquinas. It was polemical. It carried a sense of having arrived. The second era was the mid-1960s to the mid-70s. Father Woodbury was still in charge, but as Peter indicated, his attitude and teachings weren't quite meeting the needs of people who were coming forward at that time. It was, in fact, a time of transition, but I think it must be said that it was largely unacknowledged by Aquinas Academy at that time. The third era was the mid-70s through to the late 80s, even early 90s, beginning with John Thornhill and followed up by Alan Connors. The Christian Growth Program was the main offering. Many middle-aged and older Catholics, especially religious, were in search of a new way of being Catholic. Catholic schools were also asking their teaching staff to get basic qualifications in the faith. New possibilities in theology, morality and spirituality were sought. It was experiential and pastorally oriented, incorporating the thinking that had emerged from Vatican II. Father Connors once told me that he had driven over 1 million kilometres to take the Christian Growth Program to various parts of the eastern side of Australia. The fourth era was in the 1990s, another transition period. The director was Father Kevin Bates, one of our most creative men. The clientele of the 70s and 80s had already diminished or were seeking new horizons. It demanded something new. Kevin recognised this and responded imaginatively and innovatively. The fifth era was beginning to emerge about the year 2000, and I think it is still with us. This is the era in which genuine conversation is being called for. That is, open-hearted encounters between people, willing and able to listen to each other and to God. Not necessarily Catholics either. The special focus of Aquinas at this time has been the recovery of the mystical heart of the gospel tradition. I believe we have been affirmed in this by Pope Francis and his commitment to recover synodality in the Church. I pray that the resources online continue to give many inspiration and hope as the lectures on site have done these past 78 years. I look forward to the future. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Dr. Robert Tilley, for those who don't know him already. Robert has a Bachelor of Arts, Master of Arts, awarded with merit, Bachelor of Divinity, Honours First Class and a PhD, all from the University of Sydney. Robert has lectured mostly in the areas of biblical studies at a number of institutions, including the University of Sydney, Catholic Institute of Sydney, Notre Dame, and the Matt Talbot Hostel. He has been lecturing at Aquinas Academy for more than 10 years. So welcome, Robert.
Okay, I was told that I had 10 or 11 or 12 or an hour to talk. So whatever the case is, I want to come at this from a little bit of a different angle and in some ways present something quite different that I think a number of you would have experienced. I want this to be a very personal celebration. So yeah, it's going to be about me as well. But I hope that it'll become clear where the accent lies. It's a celebration, but also a thanks. I've lectured in the Aquinas Academy, I think, possibly around 15 years, maybe even a bit more. And I've been given the kind of freedom here to explore and do cross-disciplinary topics, which I would argue marks a true liberal education. And as for that term liberal, I'm going to come back to that in a short while. Thus, I've given talks on Scripture, showing how it ties in, actually, with Catholic doctrine and dogma, perhaps the most popular being Marian themes, things like Mary, the Temple of Scripture, and ones more recently about Mary and the Song of Songs. I've also taught here on philosophy and theology and the arts, literature, poetry, and fine arts. So in literature, people like George Saunders, Roberto Bolaño, Michel Houellebecq. In poetry, Hopkins, T.S. Eliot, Wallace Stevens, to contemporary poets, the Sydney poet Stephen Edgar, endeavouring to show how art and theology and, of course, Scripture are inextricably entwined, an approach discouraged in our fragmented, fractured world of discrete departments in universities, including Catholic ones for that matter as well. Along the way, there's been a lot of goodwill and nice happenstances. And I was asked to give a few examples. This is very brief. When I did a series here on James Macaulay, on Captain Quiros, I was invited to actually Richard Connolly's home. Richard Connolly worked with James Macaulay, did mass settings and hymns and so on and so forth. It was pretty amazing to handle first editions signed by James Macaulay. Now, Richard, God bless his soul, has departed this world, has died, and I'm of the opinion that he's gone straight to heaven, because I don't think he needed much time in purgatory, because he and Cynthia used to attend the same church I do, St. Francis of Assisi, and he used to sit in front of me when we would sing the hymns. And though I like singing, people don't like my singing. So I think he suffered a lot. When I did a series on William Robinson, the artist, and Louise Heerman, one of the students, maybe you'll hear today, actually brought in an original William Robinson to be behind me while I talked. If you know how much William Robinson paintings command, you'll see that's pretty significant. And then there was a series I did on Martin Sharp. As it turned out, in a really neat piece of synchronicity that Martin would have loved and would have appreciated, right next door here is an office filled with his paintings, for the owner is a rather keen collector of Martin's work. Aquinas Academy was truly an adult education college, one intent on forming the mind, soul, spirit of all and sundry, especially the faithful. Today there is, again, prior to Woodbridge's time, little on offer in the church. Rather, talks nowadays, it seems to me, in the church are, as it were, evangelical in concept. And I'm not too sure that that really captures the depth of the faith. There used to be years ago the Catholic adult education at Lidcombe, which was likewise very good, and that has gone the way of all flesh. And now, alas, in the physical way, the Aquinas Academy. And it's here I want to return to the question of liberal education. By this I mean truly inclusive, not that kind of middle-class inclusion that we see so much in America or here that excludes people under the name of inclusion. And to throw this point home, my theology, as probably most of you know, is conservative. My politics and economics, as probably some of you know, is of the old-style left. Thus, I am resolutely anti-abortion, anti-euthanasia. I spoke against gay marriage. Am for the visible institutional hierarchical order and authority, and you can get ready to boo and hiss on this. I'm against women being priests. The reason I say this is not to provoke, perhaps a little, but because the majority of those attending Aquinas, especially those of Catalyst for Renewal, are, let us say, of a more liberal theological leaning. And yet, and this is a point I want to make, and praise Aquinas Academy and those who attended, at no time was I ever asked not to speak on a topic. At no time was I ever subtly shunned, quietly dropped, invitations silently withdrawn. Indeed, not a few of you came back for more. I guess it's masochism is the term for that. The Aquinas Academy was and is the model of a true liberal stance, inclusive even of that which many would want to be excluded, to be no-platformed. And this, I think, is by reason of two people whom I think share the glory, Sister Mary and Father Michael. And here I want to come to a matter of even greater praise. Even though I had all those degrees that you heard, I could not get an interview for a job anywhere in secular universities or Catholic for 10 years because I was a principal whistleblower at Sydney University as to how they handled allegations of sexual assault, rape. Liberal and conservative figures wouldn't support myself or others in that charge. And consequently, I guess I was black banned. It was when I was working at WEA, Workers' Education and others, that Sister Mary heard of me and came to hear of me and invited me to the Aquinas Academy. I was still frozen out of all these other places, even when I had my book published, Benedict XVI in the Search for Truth. But it was Sister Mary that actually encouraged me to still apply for jobs, especially at CIS, which is where I've been since then. Then in 2018, the turn happened and I became a pariah in the Archdiocese among conservatives when I stood up and opposed those furloughed conservatives who insulted and defamed Pope Francis. Once people who were friends, seminarians I taught, young clergy, cut me. This included very high-up clergy, let me tell you, and also priests whom I taught. Here I want to just say one major exception to that, and God bless his soul, is Father Peter Kwok, the parish priest at Beverly Hills. If you're at Beverly Hills, you're very lucky to have a parish priest like that. Of course, when the madness abated, the bishops who had been silent now praised Francis, perhaps 2 years too late. But it was here at the Aquinas Academy I was able to defend Pope Francis, and I was not cut. The friendship with Sister Mary and Father Michael continued, and so too their support. Loyalty is a very precious and noble thing. I think it expresses substance. It requires backbone and often the courage to be identified with those who are on the outer. It tells of the character of a person. It tells of sincerity and it tells of their honesty. Above all, it says that, yes, you can trust this person, while those who compromise their principles, turn their backs on what is now unpopular, well, they have the soul of the quisling. There is much to praise the Aquinas Academy for, but the praise really belongs to Father Michael and Sister Mary. And of course, the praise for them goes to our Lord Jesus Christ. and to his mother, Our Lady, for her prayers for the church, for I think many of those prayers were answered in them. What now? There are other projects, the Call to Be, the Aquinas Academy website, but I suppose given things too like becoming Marists, leaving St. Pat's, many of us I know are rather despondent. And yet in the scriptures there is a recurring theme, perhaps best expressed in Isaiah chapter 6, verses 11 to 13, when God says to the prophet that the people are in fact going to get duller of heart, they're going to get worse. And Isaiah asks, "How long, O Lord?" And God replies, "Until cities lie waste, the land is utterly desolate, and even if a 10th part remains in it, it will be burned again, like a terebinth or an oak, whose stump remains after it is felled. The holy seed is its stump. There is a remnant of a remnant, a bare remainder, a soul, seed. And yet, as our Lord makes clear in Mark chapter 4, in the parable of the sower, the seed in the right soil can seem dead and lie fallow, and yet it can suddenly burst in a 30, 60, 100-fold harvest. I think many seeds have been sown through the Aquinas Academy, and though things might look fallow, and like most of us here, old, these seeds, these words, in God's good time, can burst out. And it will, I think, be held. The Sister Mary and Father Michael were loyal servants who kept the course. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. We're now going to hear from Sister Mari Bedell. Mari was appointed Coordinator of Programs at Aquinas Academy in January 2000 and has held that position until the closure in 2021. Thank you, Mari.
Well, after that, really all I have to say is thank you to everybody. That's my big response to the wonderful, the wonderful privilege that I've had being here for the last 20 years. And for that, firstly, I want to thank the Marist Fathers, the community here who's welcomed me, the Marist leadership team, formerly at CTU, and I've just been so, as I said, privileged to be part of something that is life-giving and real. I'm supposed to be very short, so I think I better be extra short because we have to have a cup of tea. I want to thank them particularly, and I won't go over what I was going to say because it's already been said, the wonderful ministry that's been established here over these years. I secondly want to appreciate and thank my community who had me educated. And in this relationship, I'd like to mention particularly Sister Josephine Mitchell and Pat Duffy, who were really greatest allies for me throughout my time here and before I went overseas, because I was in the school system and I felt we needed to anchor the faith not so much in a psychological tradition as a primary explanation of the faith, but to integrate it in a way that was really meaningful for people and that could allow ourselves to converse about it. And I used to, and I'm going off the track here, but I used to say to the students in years 11 and 12, just write down all the things you don't believe in or you'd like to know more of or you feel you would like to argue with, and that'll be our program, because at that time we didn't have to comply with the religion program as such. And it was wonderful because it was no problem teaching, because you just had each one. And, you know, the other thing that was beautiful about that was that both Benilde and Nazareth used to join together for their religious education. And so you had the boys and the girls, and that suited me fine. When the boys were on their high horse, the girls would come in under often. But it was great. Anyway, I do want to thank those two ladies particularly for the opportunity to study and then to come back. And Patricia said to me, find where you can give what you've been given. And it was then that the Marists invited me, and I was so grateful to work. And I'll speak about working with Michael a bit later. But with Michael, I'd really like to thank all the participants that have given us so much over the years. I suppose I was thinking the other day, what do I want to thank them for? Your desire to explore the faith realistically, the yearning to make more meaningful through your questioning and your lived experience, your insights and openness, and particularly your kindness. It's been a wonderfully kind environment to work in. And, you know, that allows you to blossom in a way that goes beyond what your really gifts are, in a way. It's everybody within it. I want to thank especially the many volunteers who've contributed over the years, too many to name, with all the... yes, but I do want to name some. Steve and Jeff and Roy and Janice and Jackie and Penny and Mavis. All of these people have been contributing whether to put things in envelopes before we had the internet connection with everybody. But particularly and especially I want to thank Leanne and Greg, who've been the backbone of the practical functioning over the past 3 years, or the last 2 years of my being there, and in the inauguration with Pauline of the Phoenix rising out of the ashes in the call to be, which we'll hear about a little bit more later. I also, and you would understand, I have been very appreciative of our lecturers. Catherine, who's always been there to back us up and magnificently given so many different courses, and our wonderful Robert Tilley. He's brilliant, he's generous, he's a man of great integrity, and that's what gives us a strength. I really appreciate that. And I can't thank them all because there are many, but I also want to mention the lecturers that have come in from time to time from the different traditions that have given us an appreciation of what is common to all human formation. And in relation to Michael often speaking with them, what is particular about the Christian tradition? What is common? Well, first of all, what is common to the human formation, what is common to religious formation traditions, but what is particular about the Christian formation tradition. And then the many lecturers who've also included, well, I better not start because I don't want to move anyone out, but the particular traditions that have arisen in the Catholic Church in response to problems of the times, like the Dominicans, like the Carmelites, like the Josephites, like the etc., Franciscans, and have given their courses according to their particular charism. So that's the thank yous. And lastly, I want to thank Michael, who's been a great friend, companion, mentor, searcher throughout the time that we've been together. He actually picked me up from the airport when I went to Pittsburgh. We both studied under Adrian Van Kaam, and he said to me, "I'll pick you up at the airport because it's a fair way out, and I'll take you to your new..." I was staying in Pittsburgh with the sisters, and he said, "I'll pick you up," and that was... He had a great laugh at my little electric typewriter, and he said, "That will never do, you're here." But his goodness, his constancy, his immense energy continues to inspire me always. And his deep faith, I think, and the desire to communicate what he lives himself, not only to know about God, but to know God and to be who we're called to be. The unique place where God enters the world today in the joint ongoing journey of decision and discovery that we're all on. So we're also very conscious these days of that decision and discovery has to extend not just to God, ourselves and others, but to all creation. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mari. On behalf of all the students here, I'm sure we all want to say thank you to you both for all your wisdom and love over the years, because you've changed many of our lives. So thank you to both of you. My husband Greg will come up the front now to introduce us to the new Aquinas website.
That's Greg Zinner.
Oh, thank you, Mari. That was beautiful. It's a bit of a bittersweet day for me, but Mari, you talked about the kindness of the volunteers, but I'd like to briefly add that both you and Michael made it very easy to be kind and reflect the kindness that you showed us. And you made it very easy to serve you and be of whatever little contribution and usefulness we could have been. So thank you for that opportunity. And I for one, and I think I'll speak for many of them, that we're very privileged to be able to be a small part of Aquinas Academy. Now, Michael, in his foresight, when he started leading the Aquinas Academy, well, he thought that maybe some use of the technology might be of benefit, and he probably did not plan that far ahead, but he made sure that a lot of the material got recorded on the technology of the day, which was the cassette player. And as a result, a lot of the speakers and the DYOS course, including Robert Tilley's, you only listen to 11 minutes of Robert, but I think there is about 40 hours on the website, so you can so you have opportunity to study that. But as a result, we have, through those recordings, in physics, we know that energy cannot be created or destroyed, but through those recordings, Michael was able to preserve some small part of the enormous energy that flowed through Aquinas Academy. And during COVID, he also had another great idea of hiring a professional company to essentially revamp the website and build a very good foundation for going forward. So what I want to say about is, if you know a little bit about the websites, there's the front part and then there is the back part. So the back is where you have the information, how quickly and easily you can adapt it and grow it and change it and transform it based on the needs. So he has given that to us, and going forward, that part I'm hoping that the website will be alive for as long as possible and will be a living entity, and that will definitely be very easy going forward. So let me just briefly turn my back to you and show you a few things. So yes, presenting a new website is not a very exciting thing, but I just want to point out a few things so you know where to find things. First of all, if you go home tonight and you would like to have a look at it, it's aquinas-academy.org.au. The old website was .com. This is more appropriate. It's .org.au. And only about probably 50, maybe 60% of the material has made it to the website at this time. And I'm hoping that before Christmas or even in the next kind of 4 weeks or so, we'll be able to link the rest of the recordings that we are at the moment, which we have. So there'll be many more hours of material available. So if you, for example, go to lecturers, if you click Dr. Robert Tilley here, and then you scroll down, you've got a brief biography. Whenever you see a plus sign, just click on that. And here there is an example of the Bible and Literature series of lectures that he gave. And this particular one, it doesn't say, but that's about 8 hours, right, of materials. So now we have Michael's weekly homilies on this website as well. And they go back to, I think, 2013. The new ones will be coming online. At the moment, they stop at Christmas last year. But again, in the next couple of weeks, we'll be putting them up here as well. I mean, today you can see them on St. Pat's website. And for some of you, the old-timers, I've got good news, because as part of the recordings, we were able to find a complete set of the one of the original offerings of DYOS, which was 28 sessions, right? That went over 4 units, and so this is from 2006, right? Now Michael and Mari over the years adjusted the content and grew it, but just listening to that will give you an idea how timeless this material is. And finally, just don't want to bore you, there's a lot of material that Michael has published and on various topics. So again, if you go to the essays, there is many pages of very valuable material. So just to give you an idea of some of the other recordings that we have, for example, Robert Tilley did there's a Lenten series by Michael from, I think, 2007. And Robert Tilley did, Jeffrey Robinson, there's Thomas Aquinas. And there was, I can't find it now, but there's a couple of other retreats. Jeffrey Robinson and Common Lectures and Mystic Visions. And there's also a couple of offerings from Bishop Greg Homeming from Lismore, who came here and also lectured. So overall, there is about 250 hours of material recorded. So even if you listen to, say, 10%, 1%, right? And I would suspect that 1 hour of the material takes about 5 to 10 hours of processing. So you've got a lot of material to go through and study. Now, finally, what I would like to say is that so we have this website that is just being launched. So this is an alpha release, and we'll be completing this as quickly as possible. But going forward, I would like to invite all of you to take a look and give us feedback, because we want to make it a living offering, and it's only thanks to you. If you don't like something, that's fine. If you like something, let us know. Best of all, if you have some ideas, they'll be great as well. But my point is that website is totally customizable. We can change it. We can include material very easily. So going forward, the aim is to make it as useful as possible for everybody. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg. Now, we're going to have a break. Now we have some wine, some food and some other offerings out there. We'd appreciate if you could go out and meet and greet and reminisce about your time here at Aquinas Academy. And then we'll meet again afterwards to wrap it up with a short talk by Pauline about the call to be.
For well over half an hour, participants enjoyed healthy finger food and appropriate celebratory beverages. It then took several minutes to recall everyone to their seats.
Well, quite a few long-lost tales of Aquinas emerged during the break, and a few people have asked if they can share them.
My name is John Kenny. I'm here recording on behalf not only of the Aquinas Academy but also the Australian Catholic Historical Society. Now, I haven't actually done any Aquinas Academy courses, but one of my fellow parishioners at Denniston has, and it really shows in the solid faith that now underpins her ministry as a catechist. When she said that she couldn't come to this meeting, I asked her to write down her recollections. Her name is Jenny McLeod, and she says, I have just browsed through my notes and printed handouts from the Aquinas Academy Christian Growth Program 1, which I attended at St Kevin's Parish, Eastwood in 1983. This program comprised theology, psychology and spirituality. Unfortunately, I've not written any memoirs as such, but remember that I enjoyed the program thoroughly. From memory, each meeting was well attended and very well received. As a young mother of 3, the youngest of whom had just started school, I gratefully accepted this wonderful opportunity to be challenged and to increase my knowledge of my faith. It was a privilege to be in the company of such learned priests. Father Alan Connors gave us much to think about as we explored many interesting topics in the psychology section of the program. Father John Thornhill's sessions on theology and spirituality were inspiring, to say the least. I know that I felt empowered and informed when I stepped out of those sessions. I'm so grateful for this experience and for having encountered those 2 priests during that time in my life. They helped to form my faith and to strengthen my thirst for knowledge. One question that I can remember Father Connors putting to us was, a man who normally went to Mass each Sunday decided on this one occasion to miss Sunday Mass. And you can see what's coming, can't you? And go fishing with his mates. During the day, a storm blew up. The boat capsized and all men drowned. Where is our man? Has he been condemned to hell? It was comforting to learn that one rash decision does not necessarily define one's lack of a committed response to God. Included with notes and handouts was some paperwork advertising a reunion of the Eastwood class of 1983, which Sheila Gibson and I had organised for Tuesday the 31st of July 1984. It mentions that our lecturers, Fathers Thornhill and Connors, have graciously accepted the invitation to join us. I'd forgotten that I was even involved with organising this event. We had enclosed a short questionnaire for participants to complete before that day. This asked, to what extent has the course influenced your understanding of human behaviour, your spiritual life, your personal theology? Also, to what extent do you quote ideas from the course or discuss it with others? Would you recommend the course to others? Are you interested in doing a further course? Sadly, I don't seem to have a copy of my responses. We were offered opportunities for questions and discussion time on the following areas of general interest: conscience and guilt, the fundamental option, human life, catechetics, ministry of the laity, prayer, the sacraments, theology. Jenny concludes, thank you for allowing me this trip down memory lane.
Yes, good evening, everybody. My name is Claire, and I'm here with my husband, who happens to be Frank. I hope this will be very short. I wanted to say a couple of words because I actually knew Dr. Woodbury, and I was expecting to see some people here this afternoon who might have also been around. I think, Michael, that it would be Group 2 or Session 2 time that you were describing earlier. I was listening most attentively to how you were dividing up the different time periods for the academy. It happened that I was a student with another girl called Mary, and we happened to be at the conservatorium, so it wasn't too far to come down here in the evening. We'd go to 5:30 Mass here at the church and then go around to Dr. Woodbury for 6. Well, I could only endorse Father Peter's words earlier when he said he was a little bit eccentric. He was the most one-off, true Aussie boy from Spencer on the Hawkesbury, and he just loved all the same. He loved Tolko, camembert cheese, and we often took that little indulgence for him when we went to class, and he loved to have that with a biscuit later on privately. Mary introduced me to go to the classes of the doc, and I really wasn't prepared for it, and I learnt to go with fear and actually trembling, because the doc, if you've been, some people I know have been to his lectures because they're laughing already. He used to he'd be wandering around and, speaking up at the highest level you can imagine, but then he'd sort of focus on you and he'd ask you the question. And I was in fear and trembling. He'd ask me something, and I hadn't read over the notes or learnt the definition from last week or something. And he did ask me a question once. I don't know how I ever got out of it, but I did. And I thought I was understanding nothing until Gough Whitlam came on the throne here, and some of us were able to get to university as a more mature age student, and I found words in essays coming out of me like the word ontological, and I thought, how would I ever have known that word but for the doc? So I realised that it had washed across my brain. Anyway, more importantly than the meeting of the doc was some years later, Mary had gone overseas and I'd gone overseas after her in some time later. The doc was also going overseas to arrange to have a degree conferred here at the academy, but via the permissions and details from Rome. And on the way over, on the plane, he actually collapsed, as some people might remember. Well, it happened that Mary and I had met up overseas, and we had a 4-year course at the con, so Mary and I by this stage knew each other well. She was travelling with a guitar, and our families contacted us about the doc collapsing. Well, we visited the doc in Rome every day for some time, and when Mary brought the guitar and sang him some good Aussie songs, which he loved, and then we were going on up to Salzburg and Bayreuth for the music festivals that were on, but before we all left going where we were going, he had the most strong desire to do a little bit of a revisit of his student days in Rome. So he begged us to get the horse and carriage that goes over all the cobbled streets in Rome, and he took us wherever he'd been, all the architectural features and everything else of his time. He was so happy, and he even arranged an audience with the Holy Father of the time for us. So that was the last and more conservative aspect of our time with the dog.
Anybody else want to share something?
James Franklin. I think I'm one of the few people who can reminisce both about Dr. Woodbury's time and the last time of Michael Whelan's. I was a student of Dr. Woodbury in 1973. That was the last full year he lectured, and as everybody says, he was kind of losing it a little bit, but still coherent. But I couldn't understand it. I couldn't understand the kind of formulaic aspect. So I thought, I've got to go back and read Aquinas to find out what's going on. I did that. I'm making some progress. Although I still don't understand, I've got to go back and read Aristotle. So I did that, finally felt I was making some progress. And a result of that was my book called An Aristotelian Realist Philosophy of Mathematics. Okay. I realise that's rather a niche topic, yeah, but anyway, it had it. Yeah. Some people liked it in that area. In 2007, Michael Whelan kindly asked me to give 4 lectures on ethics from the ground up, which is a foundational aspect of ethics, not about what you should do, right and wrong and so on. And I think I see a few people who were at that. Thanks for coming. The book about that is published this Tuesday, called The Worth of Persons, The Foundations of Ethics. You're welcome to the book launch, which is November the 19th. State Library of New South Wales, I think you can find the information online. So many thanks to the Academy in its different forms for giving me those nudges at the beginning. Great work.
Catherine Hammond. So it's about 43 years of my association with Aquinas, and it started off at a time when we were totally enthused about everything happening in the church and the perspectives that are opening up and the hope of new church and everything. It was a great time, and I used to come to Aquinas around 6 and have classes in philosophy, and I tried to distill very complex ideas into something that everybody could grasp and maybe find relevant, so they liked that. And I'd have 50 or 60 people in every class. It was just booming. I remember one fellow, he had 6 kids, supporting them. He worked in a brewery, I think Tui's or one of those, as a technician. When that was done, he'd come to the class of philosophy. I thought, my goodness, it was really wonderful to teach people like that, because they were just eager to. They never said it was too hard or too much or nothing. They just seemed to. And after the class was over at 9 o'clock, they'd still be hanging around, still talking, and it was just wonderful. So I am very appreciative of everything that Aquinas gave me. And somebody was saying to me a while ago, I know who it was, and she said that the thing that she found was that no longer did you have to just think of the traditional teaching and the traditional interpretation, but in those days you could broaden it, you could make it relevant to other artists and poets and writers. It was breaking out of that Catholic sort of, restraining ghetto, and it was a time when many sisters, many nuns were coming. Some of them really eager for stuff they hadn't had. They'd just been thrown into teaching as long as they could stand up in front of a class. So they were eager. I mean, it was a mix of young and old, and it just was a great time. So that's my memories.
I don't have anything to say about the Aquinas Academy except that I loved coming here. But would the speakers mind say, I know there's at least 2 of us who are struggling to hear, so would the speakers mind coming out to the front and speaking clearly into the microphone? Thank you.
Anybody else? No hands up? No? Okay. Thank you. I will now introduce Pauline.
That's Pauline Muller,
who is going to talk to us about the call to be.
Hi, everybody. That's a very daunting group of speakers, including the participants, to talk after. Very inspiring and so beautiful. And what it does to me is it actually brings out this beautiful spirit. So maybe that's what's helping me to go forward with our other lovely volunteers. When Aquinas Academy was closing down, it was very, very sad for so many of us who've been in and out of Aquinas Academy for so many years and got so much out of it, as we can see here today. So it was incumbent on us to say, how can we move this forward? And Michael said, write a bit of a vision and see where that takes you, and then we'll talk about it. We did a bit of discerning, and he looked at Van Cam, and I also inherited a lot of the books from the library at Aquinas Academy. and did a bit of contemplating. And the call to be really started speaking. And so much of what Michael and Mari espouse are found in the call to be. I just want to recount a very personal experience, because my daughter is in her 30s, our daughter, my husband's here today too, and she was brought up a Catholic, but as many young people do, moved away from the Catholic Church, and she was down in the Kangaroo Valley on a permaculture farm, finding herself. And so I sent her various pieces of information, and some of it was out of the call to be, among other things. And I tried not to make too much of it, and I said, look, read what you want out of any of the things I send you. When she came back, I said to her, well, was any of that of interest? And she said, yes, I loved the things that came out of the call to be. It spoke to her as well. And so that was also another indication that a lot of the things that Michael and Mari have been trying to do through the Aquinas Academy, which brings the psychological, the sociological, the spiritual together then to understand our faith, really helps us to understand, to be aware. And I think also, you know, the importance of conversation, which they so emphasise, and as we rightly come under Catalyst for Renewal. So that's, I think, where sort of the genesis of the call to be came. We're very lucky, and also with Leanne and Greg, and now a few others have joined us as well, in organising also for next year. And we are being... all the people who have worked with Aquinas Academy have been very kind to continue to contribute. So we have a brochure there sitting on the desk with the other books. So if you want to take that away and continue to join us in the call to be, that would be lovely. I just want to finish with one comment that comes out of synodality, because that's what this is about. I think Michael talked about transitions, and we're a little bit of another transition. And I was really interested in Pope Francis's call for our personal involvement, what I would call enthusiastic amateurs. And he said, through synodality, and what I understand this to mean, all of the people, all of the time, listening to each other as they journey together. And Michael would say, journey is a mystery, to remove barriers and bring people together from the margins. So that is a little bit of the vision of what we hope to keep going with the call to be. And we continue to use Mari and Michael as our mentors. And we hope that you will continue to join us next year in continuing the call to be.
Hi, I just wanted to say one thing, and thank you, Pauline, for your talk about the call to be. And I wanted to especially thank Michael and Mari for... I've been coming to the Aquinas Academy since 2013 after doing a pilgrimage to India, and what that experience that you both provided has given me a canvas for a better way of being, and I shall be eternally grateful. So, well done.
Well, thank you everyone for coming. That actually ends the official part of the day. If you still want to sit down and reminisce with a glass of wine, there's plenty left, and a bit of food, but thank you very much for coming.
You've been listening to a historic closing celebration for the Aquinas Academy. This podcast was a special joint production of the Aquinas Academy and the Australian Catholic Historical Society. The ACHS was founded in 1940, also in Sydney, but it doesn't yet possess vast audio archives to compare with those of the Aquinas Academy. The Society commenced a regular podcast program only when the COVID pandemic disrupted local face-to-face meetings in 2020, then recognised that podcasts also fulfil the needs of country, interstate and overseas members, and its role as a National Historical Society. Given the broad remit of the Aquinas Academy's programs, its alumni may well find podcasts of interest in the resources section of the ACHS website. Topics like Les Murray's Sacramental Poetics, the synodal path of Australia's 5th Plenary Council, the century and a half since Pastor Aeternus and the promulgation of the doctrine of papal infallibility, a celebration of the life and achievements of the Institute of Counselling, a practical response to Vatican II, the contested history of the Bible in Australia, David Coffey, theologian of spirit, Catholic New Testament research and the significance of the encyclical Divino Afflante Spiritu and Vatican II, a place for faith in the public square, biblical history in the novels of Dickens, or Champagnat Maris Brothers in Australia from 1872 to the present. So, have a browse and a listen, there may be something there for you. This podcast was recorded and produced by me, John Kenny, on the lands of the Gadigal and Waltamatigal peoples of the Eora Nation. Bye for now.